Hey everyone, Brian Beeler and Kevin O'Brien coming to you from the StorageReview Lab, and today we're talking about a solution that we've been working on some time. In fact, it's a little half-rack guide that we had rolled into our lab and have been working on from HPE, their Nimble dHCI solution.
It's half, but it's still very heavy.
Yeah, so part of the challenges of running a sort of a remote lab in the suburbs of Cincinnati is we don't always have things that are fancy like loading docks, so we have to get creative. But what's really cool about the half rack that the HPE shipped is it has ramps. Like, it's one of the neatest setups I've ever seen.
It's really awesome, but we found that out after we already got into the
Right,
building.
but when it leaves, it'll leave on ramps and it'll be way easier to get it out of here.
Yes.
But before we send it on its way, we want to talk a little bit about what we've been finding with this solution. It's a really neat hyper-converged, or in this case, disaggregated hyper-converged solution. And I remember the I believe it was the last VMworld that was in Moscone before this whole nonsense happened. There was a distinctive, palpable buzz on the floor about what HPE was showing off down in their booth, and that was Nimble dHCI. And at the time, I don't think a lot of people really understood what was going on there because VMworld, their products tend to be the lead, but Nimble, with this disaggregated concept within vSphere, vCenter, was causing quite a stir. So
Yeah.
it's pretty exciting. And one of the things that's great about dHCI in general is that it lets you decouple storage and compute from each other. So as you grow your infrastructure, you can grow additional storage or additional compute. You don't have to grow them in lockstep. And that's a big difference for organizations that have unpredictable needs. And let's get into this a little bit more. We've brought our friend Daniel Elder in from HPE Nimble. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're glad you're here. And I started to tease out this concept of disaggregated HCI. In your view, from a Nimble perspective, what does that mean in terms of what you offer your customers?
What we really offer is the ability to have the flexibility so you can do whatever you need to with your environment. You're not stuck into having to do linear scaling on the nodes that you're adding. If you need more compute, you can add just compute. If you need additional storage, you can add additional shelves or additional arrays and scale out that however you need to. If you need, extra cores, you can add extra cores. If you need nodes with more memory, you can add higher memory nodes. You really, really have the flexibility to size for however your growth needs are. And the nice thing is because we're not running this as some sort of layover on top of the compute nodes, you don't have any wasted resources. You're not having any sort of the HCI tax that you often get where there's
Right.
something that has to run on each node because it all runs as a separate orchestration layer.
And actually, yeah, when it came in, we only had 2 of the compute nodes in the cluster at first. There was a third sort of chilling there.
Yeah, we didn't have to add it all in at the same time, and it was actually really easy to incorporate the third node.
And if we wanted to add other nodes, we can add any other ProLiants we choose. Well, maybe not any other, that might be a tad of a stretch, but most other ProLiants, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Currently they would have to be within the same CPU family because it would add to the same cluster. Multi-cluster support is in the future, but it's coming. But yeah, you have the flexibility whether you want to do like a 325, 385, 360, 380, 560, 580. I mean, you can really put whatever you want in there to match your needs.
Yeah, and so that's cool. I think the dHCI concept in general makes a lot of sense to give people, those organizations, back some of the flexibility that they can lose from HCI, but still maintaining the management and the ease of use and that sort of thing. At a high level, how do you help your customers differentiate between when Nimble dHCI is the right solution or when a more traditional HCI infrastructure like SimpliVity or something else that HPE sells? How do you help them figure that out?
We typically position SimpliVity as being more for like edge use case scenarios. So if you're looking at like the 3 to 4 node and maybe a remote office, that's kind of when we tend to push that because it's very easy management. You just throw them out there, and you have your cluster ready to go. When you're looking at like a core data center type thing where you need that flexibility, and there's going to be likely growth in the future, or you're going to need more substantial than 3 nodes, you're going to be running production workloads on it. That's when we tend to put that out there. And the really nice thing is, both the setup and the install are simple, but we also provide that really flexible lifecycle management in terms of, because we have one-click upgrade in there now, so you can do essentially a full stack update non-disruptively, unattended, and it just really makes that management piece so much easier.
Well, don't give away the big finish. We're going to do we're going to look at the upgrade thing at the very end if we don't tease that out too far. But when we talk about getting the system in, the cluster in, you took it and just slammed it into our vCenter, right, as part of the deployment.
Yeah, it's really easy. You put in the credentials and you just get rolling, and you don't have to do that if you don't have an existing vCenter up and running.
Right, so there's 2 things, right, is that we can either join an existing infrastructure or start a new one, and I know you've got a couple slides for us on that are going to walk through the setup process, because we've done the setup, obviously, and we didn't want to undo and start over from scratch, but it took, 15 minutes?
Yeah, it wasn't that
10
long
minutes?
at all.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a quick deployment. So let's walk us through that a little bit, if you would.
Okay. Yeah. So if you can see my screen there.
Yeah, sure can.
In this case, Greenfield is referring to a new dHCI setup install. And once you get everything racked and cabled, and you configure your top of rack switches to be able to meet the networking requirements, which we fully detail in the deployment guides. From this point, you kick off the setup, and it does the array setup. Now, the array setup portion of it takes maybe 5 minutes, if that, and that configures the underlying Nimble array with the management interfaces and the iSCSI interfaces. And then the next step is it enters the full stack setup. In the full stack setup, it discovers whatever ProLiant nodes you have out there via SLP, and it does a check to make sure that they are fully conformant. That means that they're supported model numbers, that they have the correct software versions, that Nimble Connection Manager is installed on them, which is how they come from the factory. So there's no actual software setup you need to do on the ProLiant if you're getting these new. You just plug them in and let DHCP assign an address, and they're good to go. Once everything is validated, if you need to correct any cabling or anything, you can do that. Then it moves forward, and it basically takes the compute nodes, provisions a couple of data stores as basically service data stores, and builds your ESX cluster. If you're opting to install a new vCenter server, then at that point, it'll vMotion that onto the dHCI. And then it's ready for production. I've deployed several of these, and they're right. I mean, it's normally about 5 to 10 minutes beginning to end, and very slick. And the actual setup process itself, we're going to pick this up at the beginning of the stack setup. You get a prerequisites view, so you still have an opportunity to double check everything, make sure everything is good to go, and all these menus will show you, what the best practice is. In this case, I'm using an existing vCenter server, and you enter the credentials for it, view the end user license agreement, accept it. And then at this point, I'm opting to create a new cluster from discovered ProLiant servers, because it's a brand new install. So I tell it the name of the data center I want to create, the cluster. I could also join an existing data center if I wanted to. We'll pick the actual physical servers that we have out there. In this case, I've got 4 I'm building the cluster from. If for some reason you didn't have the right credentials on those, or SLP wasn't working, you could manually add them from IP. And here we're going to specify the network configuration that's going to be applied to the ESX servers. In this case, we can split out the ILO management network and the ESX management network, which will have the VM, the default VM network and all that good stuff. I'm putting them on the same one just because it was in my lab environment. And then we specify the IPs that iSCSI will use. If we wanted to at this point, we could add additional data stores. That can be done at any point. The Nimble plugin manages all that as well. But if we wanted to at deployment time, we could. The reserved service data stores are the default ones that have things like data store heartbeat and everything. Review the configuration, and then it kicks off. And this goes through the full stack setup. This configures the ESX servers. It configures the data stores. It presents the storage. It configures all your iSCSI settings and enables the iSCSI software initiators and puts in the array IP for dynamic discovery. So all of that stuff is fully automated. And then it's complete. And from there, we can go into the UI and actually manage it like we would any other VMware environment.
Well, yeah, so we were talking about our deployment process, which was exactly that, which we documented in the work we did and published to the site. But the funny thing is, I think we didn't even have any network problems this time, which is normally the thing that takes that 8-minute to 10-minute deployment and turns it into something longer. So we went through the install guide, how that looked. You joined our existing VMware environment and just launched straight into the vCenter plugin, right?
Yeah, it all worked without any problem, and it's always fun when a vendor comes in and says it's really easy to install, and it really is
Actually
easy
easy
to install.
Yeah, so often the 7 clicks to completion or 4 minutes or whatever turns into something much, much more of an adventure, and this time it held true. Why don't we go take a look at the vCenter plugin, because that's where we spent a good deal of our time with this system anyway, and
So in here you get to see the existing E6i environment, and you just drop into menu and HPE Nimble Storage, and you get your interaction. So you can drill directly into the storage array, and this is the type of thing where everything is at your fingertips, and you can do a lot of the operations through the plugin without having to drill into the management itself.
So Daniel, at a high level, what's your expectation in terms of where your customers will interact or how much time they'll interact with the plugin versus the native storage controls within Nimble?
Our expectation is for day-to-day operations, almost everything would be done through the vCenter plugin. There's currently a couple things that do need to be done through the Nimble UI, but that's pretty much limited to setting up like a replication partner. Everything else can really be done through that vCenter UI, whether it's creating data stores, setting your storage-based policy management for vVols. We try to make everything and put it in the hands of the VMware administrator. So you don't need to have a separate operation done discreetly on the array.
Which has been good for us too in terms of your interaction with this, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
So as you tool around in here,
so we can see the VMs that are currently leveraging existing storage, and then from there this would snap you back into the existing E6i environment, but you can really manage everything from your day-to-day activities or adding in other items as you go.
so when we look at the number one task of provisioning storage, what does that look like in something like this?
So we can go into data stores and provision either a traditional VMFS data store and create it in that method. So quick data store 1, select your data center, and we can go in here and create which host you want it on, and you just drill into
maybe a size, right?
Yeah. Select the volume collection for data protection. So here you can select whichever one you'd prefer.
Yeah, I knew you would pick that one.
Yes, it's the easiest. Size and create.
And that's it?
Yeah.
Okay. And Daniel, the other choice would be what, to do it via vVols?
Correct. Yeah, you can go and create a vVol data store, and you can create these all within the plugin here, or if you're just out in the actual main vCenter UI, you get a contextual Nimble menu also. So you could always right-click on the cluster or the data center and opt to create the data store from there. But yeah, here it would work exactly the same. You click create, and you get slightly different options because vVols are a little bit different in how they approach life.
Yeah, so we get to select the pool, data center as before. Space limit, we're going to give that 10,000 megabytes. Or we can drill into other size limits.
Now this is a little bit different now, Daniel, when we take a look at the vVols setup.
Yep. Yeah, here you can basically kind of set a QoS setting. You can set an upper limit as far as what you want the performance to be on that particular vVol data store. So you could specify, 256, 1000 IOPS, whatever, your throughput limit. So if you have an idea of, what you have on there, let's say you're running you're going to be running like a VDI farm off of this particular vVol data store, and you don't want it to overwhelm everything else like with boot storms. You can cap that IOP limit so they won't be the noisy neighbor and drown out your other workloads, like if you are running, performant databases or something on there.
Okay, so we've done that. We've created storage a couple different ways here. The other thing that's nice about the vVols setup is the VM restores and clones and some of those additional involvements. Daniel, at a high level, what does that mean for the way your customers interact with this system?
One of the great things about vVols is that it really gives the array the ability to view and manage things at a VM granular level, and you can implement storage-based policy management, which means rather than having to go in on the array and create those volume collections and specifying snapshot schedules, you can create a VM policy that you're telling it, I want to do an hourly or a daily or both snapshot schedules. You can tell it how you want it to handle replication, and when you create that VM, it'll automatically create those policies on the array side, and you don't have to touch the array at all. So it really, really simplifies management from that perspective. And because you do get that VM granular view, you also get the ability to clone those VMs and get some, backup and restore capabilities that you don't automatically natively get with VMFS-based data stores that you might be running your VMs on.
Okay, so we've gone back into the screen here. Let's take a look at what this means. Kevin, what are we looking at?
So we're looking at the VMs are currently situated on the vVols, and from here we have a Windows 10 desktop appended 10, and we can do a quick restore, and you get to see the kind of the quick ones or roll it back depending on what your policies are.
So you're taking dailies or something here?
Yeah. And then you can either replace the existing VM or clone to a new VM.
Okay. Go ahead and clone it. What does that do?
So we'll get a VM cloned, and then it'll append the date onto that.
Right.
Yes, we want to continue, and it is off making the clone VM.
Okay. What about a restore? So when we blow up a desktop, how do we get that thing back?
So with that as well, we can go back into that same menu and click a previous time, do restore, yes, and that process is going.
So Daniel, for your customers, when they're looking at this type of functionality from within vSphere, operationally, it seems to me to be super simple and easy to navigate and to negotiate. What's the feedback you're getting from customers on this?
Same thing. It's very simple, very straightforward. It gives you a tool right out of the box that you don't necessarily need to add in complicated additional backup software. I know it's one of those things where you really do want to have all of the tools at your disposal, and from a former admin perspective, the fact that we have that basic backup and restore capability built in does give a peace of mind. One of the other really practical things that is in there is, especially if you're running like a dev environment, you can also opt to do a restore, not even just at the full VM level. You can opt to either clone or restore an individual VMDK. So let's say you're doing development and you've committed changes and you've decided that the branch that you have committed on that particular disk is the one you want to do additional work on it, but on a different VM. You can opt to restore that snapshot of just that VMDK, either replacing it with an older snapshot on that VM, or you can mount it as a new disk to that same VM, or you can mount it to a completely different VM, which is really handy. Like I said, if you're doing some sort of work where you've committed changes and you want to propagate that out, you can now clone that out to multiple other VMs so they all have the same data.
All right, that's pretty slick. As we come back into the client again, so we've looked at a couple of the different features here. Kevin, what else is going on across the top, or what other information do we have?
Before we jump out of this area, one thing I like is I tend to run fast and loose in the lab, and sometimes you might accidentally delete a VM.
Sometimes you might, or you often do.
I often do. This kind of protects yourself. You get a view of the deleted items.
You deleted one that has only time till... Oh, you must have done this already, because you've got one that's only got a day until it's dead.
Yeah, so you're given a chance to restore it and bring it back to life before it goes away, and that kind of protects you from yourself. So in case, so instead of rolling back into a backup utility like, oh crap, I deleted it, you can just do it through the GUI right here.
And Daniel, what do we get on that? 3 days or something like that?
Yep, it's a 72-hour countdown, and however you delete the VM, we don't purge that data automatically, and
right.
So you have the option to pull that back whenever you want. Well, within 3 days.
Yeah, so we can also see the ProLine servers inside this through the inventory, and then we can also see the array itself. And we do have a couple of tabs open here. One thing that's kind of nice is without having to remember, like I forget IP addresses frequently, you're able to see how things are set up, and if you want to drill into the array itself, you can click the array name and it pops you into the arrays management page.
So Kevin, as a practitioner of virtualization and storage, since you wear both hats in our small organization, in terms of what we've been doing with this cluster, how much time would you say you spent in the Nimble management versus what you were able to accomplish through VMware?
I think I did everything through the VMware side. I did not have to go that often into the Nimble management. Most of the time, it was just trying to see what's different in this GUI versus others that I've been kind of going through.
Just to get a feel for what's different, what they've been able to pull into VMware through the plugin.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back and hit this guy one more time. What else do we have going on in terms of options?
So we can go through events, configuration checks, as well as the update tool.
Now the configuration check is a good one. This one for us normally finds that we've unplugged power cables or networking ports. But Daniel, for a high-level quick report on the infrastructure, what else typically pops up here?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite features, because what it does is it checks against the best practices that we apply, but it also checks for health of the system. So if for some reason it finds that like MTU size has been changed from jumbo frames to 1500, it'll alert you. If it finds that for some reason the multipathing software isn't functional, it'll let you know. If it and you saw at the top, it'll give you an alert. One of the nice things with vVols also is that it'll show you, hey, these are VMs that we don't have protected. So you can ignore that if you want to, but you can very quickly see, if you need to put some sort of snapshot schedule on those. But it gives you a really, really quick view of both the health of the system and if you're in compliance with best practice. So yeah, if a host is unhealthy, network link goes down, you can see it really quickly here. And this runs every 24 hours. You can always rerun check whenever you want with the button there in the upper left.
Yep.
So if you remediate the changes, it'll go back and run that and let you know. And we, with every version that comes out, we always have some additional things we add in here for it to check and make sure are in a good, healthy state.
Yeah, and it's pretty expeditious too. Sometimes these tools can kind of go off on their own and take a while to pull this data.
Yeah.
From here, I know Daniel's been excited all day to hit that update button, but before that, Infosight is another big component to what we've got going on here. And in fact, Infosight was a big reason why HPE was interested in picking up Nimble in the first place, getting that analytics package. So as we consider that at a high level, Daniel, for customers that are using HPE Infosight, I'm assuming they mostly are at this point with this product. What's the feedback you're getting there?
We're getting great feedback, and Infosight is just such an incredibly powerful tool because it gives you a way to look at the health of not just one system, but the health of your entire environment. So you can look at everything that you're managing, whether it's one cluster or multiple clusters, and it gives you an overview of the health. It gives you usage information. It gives you trends. But what's really nice is it also is able to give you like recommendations. If there's software updates that need to be done, if it finds that perhaps you're vulnerable to a particular bug, it can make recommendations on that. And it's not doing that based just on the information for your cluster or your environment. It's doing that across the entire HPE install base. And it's not just dHCI that plugs in. So, we have Primera and 3PAR and everybody else that plugs into it as well. So we get analytics and run really powerful AI against it that looks for trends as far as what issues might be seen and what improvements can be made, and it'll recommend those based on what we've seen across our larger install base.
So we're taking a look at our version, and ours being a smaller cluster with not a ton of activity right now. We don't have quite as many errors, which is kind of surprising to me, quite honestly. But as we look through here, Kevin, what kind of stands out to you from a informatics kind of perspective?
Well, you get quick and easy access into the top level VMs, which ones are kind of bugging the array, your performance over time, your overall system health, protection levels, capacity. But it's a lot of quick and easy information at your fingertips, and you don't have to be logged inside your infrastructure to pull this out. You could be anywhere when you're reading this.
And I suppose you could share this with other people in the org. So if we go through and hit, I don't know if we'll even have any recommendations because we're pretty skinny on this thing. Oh, look at that. Nothing's broken. That's good. It's clean, which is good. But a lot of these things, like as simple as it seems, the visual representation of this data just makes it easy to communicate concepts around your data footprint, where it's going, what it's growing. And I do love the reduction wheel.
Yes, although if we had more on it and more duplicated things, we'd be in a higher reduction level. But
absolutely,
you get a quick access to these things because, again, seeing a number is a lot different than seeing an image of that representation of the number.
Absolutely. And we could spend a ton of time just on Infosight, and perhaps we should put a little more load on this thing sometime and do that. But the visibility into the data is really pretty strong.
Yeah, so here in wellness, we have that little one urgent alert, and that is in fact when I stole a power cable out of the back of the array. But you get a quick and easy access of that alert, and it's helpful to make sure the things are running, or you might want to check the power supply to verify they did not fail.
Yeah, because things do sometimes break, and having that visibility into it. I do like how it says case status closed, though, which is either means you ignored it or plugged in a cable.
Yes.
You're not going to disclose.
I plugged the cable back in.
Which one it was. All right, so we've got that, and now, all right, I'm going to let you go back to the plugin and take a look at this update function, because that's one of the things that I think's particularly nice. To your point earlier, Daniel, this gives really easy operational control over the entire stack, and lets you run updates from one spot.
Yes, absolutely. It's this is, I think, probably my absolute favorite piece, because it lifecycle management is always such a challenge. And when you've got to verify that the software that you have on the ESX version and the driver versions, and are your what version of ProLiant SPP are you on, and what's compatible with what. This really takes all of that guesswork out and the legwork of having to look through compatibility matrices, because we have a set matrix that's in there, and it will, against verified versions, it will only ever let you upgrade to verified versions that work with each other. So it will give you, it may give you multiple upgrade paths that you can go through if there are multiple versions out there, but it won't ever let you get into a situation where you're running on versions that are not compatible with each other. And
Right.
that is fantastic. And it's all, at this point, it is truly one click. You kick it off and it goes through the entire process, and it's non-disruptive, and it will run, it can run fully unattended and do everything that you need it to do.
Well, that's one of the dreams, right, of this kind of infrastructure, is to have that operational simplicity, seamlessness, whatever. Like, we literally just hit the button and it's off, and scanning the servers and
Yep.
eventually the storage, and then pulling all that stuff together and just going, right?
Yep, you don't need to go to 3 or 4 different sites to get your server firmware downloaded, and to download the ESX update image, and to download the Nimble OS image to do your update. It pulls all that down for you.
Well, yeah, and I would think that when you've got one cluster, that makes it a lot easier. If you're running, I don't know, 20 or 30, or if you've got these in retail or whatever the case may be, the benefits become kind of infinite at a certain point as you're able to update those infrastructures really simply.
Oh, absolutely. Because it is so simple and runs on its own, it really does scale incredibly well.
And so we're running this in the background, and I think we're current, so it probably won't find anything for us to do. But I know you've got a visualization too to walk us through for that
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah. So this is so basically what happens when you kick off an update on that is, you'll see a list of what potential versions are on there, and again, it won't let you pick anything that you can't go to. What you will see is when you click the update button, it'll issue a catalog update request. It'll reach out to HPE and pull down all of the official HPE software. It's going to, if there's updates for it, it'll get the Nimble OS image. It will get the HPE OEM ESXi image. It will get the ProLiant DL SPP, the service pack update, and the update for Nimble Connection Manager, if there is one, and automatically pull those down and implement those. Then it'll run through the pre-checks and basically does similar things to what the configuration check does. It'll check to make sure everything's in a healthy state. It will double check again to make sure that the versions that it finds there are the appropriate versions to upgrade from. And once it runs through the pre-checks, it will go through and it'll do the Nimble array first. And again, totally non-disruptive, totally unattended. It will do one node on the Nimble array and then flip that node to being active, and then it'll do the other node. Once the array is done, it will move on to the ESX host, and leveraging DRS, it will evacuate the virtual machines from the first node in the cluster, spread those across using DRS so it balances the workload, put it in maintenance mode, and once it's in maintenance mode, it'll go and update ESX and Nimble Connection Manager if there are updates to be had. It will do a reboot, and then if there is a ProLiant SPP update, that'll, for the firmware and everything else, it will go and run through that update and then reboot the node. And once that's done, it takes the ESX host out of maintenance mode, moves the VMs back, and then repeats the process for the next node. And it'll run through that one node at a time. Now it's still doing a host update, so it still takes the normal amount of time. But the nice thing is all of that is now fully automated, totally unattended. When you click update and you set it on its way and approve it, it runs completely on its own.
Right, and so we, like we said, we kicked that process off, and we would go through. We went through earlier on a build, and it was simple and no problems. How often are you guys pushing out releases? I assume with Nimble and Perliant and VMware, I mean, it must be on a pretty regular cadence.
Yeah. It is based both on what our release schedule is and the need of if there's a urgent update that needs to go out, we'll push out updates for that. Like I said, HPE has OEM's VMware's ESXi image, so we try to stay pretty current on that.
All right. Well, cool. Well, I mean, this has been a great tour through what is possible with HPE Nimble dHCI. We've looked at setup, we've looked at updates, we looked at all the management stuff in vSphere, and I guess we're going to have to give this thing back to you. What do you say we use the ramps this time?
That would be easier on my back.
Although we're going downhill on the way out the door.
You might shoot it down the parking lot.
So hopefully you'll get your cluster back in one or more pieces, and you'll be able to give engineering their toys back. But for now, we appreciate you joining in for the video, the detailed walkthrough, and it's a great solution. Everyone should be checking this out that wants something easy and scalable in a number of different ways to manage for their hyperconverged and now disaggregated hyperconverged environments.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm glad you enjoyed it.